The digital clock on the console flipped to 14:05. In the back of the unmarked Gaz-24 Volga station wagon, modified with forged Mosvodokanal, Moscow Waterworks, livery, the air was a suffocating cocktail of ozone from the humming electronics, stale Borodinsky bread, and the palpable metallic tang of human anxiety. Robert Wallace, CIA Chief of Station, Moscow, stared at the grainy black and white monitor. The image, relayed from a cesium vapor micro camera with a revolutionary telephoto lens hidden inside a rusted-out junction box on a lamppost 200 yards away, showed a specific park bench. The target was seated. The primary, Dr. Anatoly Volkov, was speaking, his hands gesturing emphatically, outlining the invisible architecture of a nightmare. The secondary, a known GRU 5th Directorate attaché named Colonel Dmitry Polyakov, was listening intently, his head cocked, a hawk studying its prey. This was the moment. 18 months of relentless work, a black budget expenditure of $22,700,000, and the bleeding edge of clandestine bioinstrumentation all converged on the next 60 seconds. Wallace keyed the integrated microphone, a custom-built unit with a noise-canceling filter to keep his voice from echoing inside the cramped, lead-lined space. His tone was flat, a carefully cultivated professional mask that betrayed no hint of the career-defining pressure he felt. Asset is static. Read, give me a status update, full telemetry. From the console to his left, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman whose unassuming appearance, a drab wool coat, hair in a tight bun, belied her position as the head of the Directorate of Science and Technology's Bioinstrumentation Division, didn't look up from her own screen. A series of green lines pulsed rhythmically, a digital representation of a life. Heart rate is 130 beats per minute, elevated but within expected parameters for a novel environment. Respiration is steady at 24 breaths per minute. Core body temperature is 38.6 Celsius. Auditory implant is online, receiving our carrier wave with 0 packet loss. The subcutaneous microfilament antenna is showing a signal strength of... Wait. The confidence in her voice evaporated, replaced by a sharp edge of concern. Signal strength is fluctuating, dropping to negative 78 decibels per milliwatt. That's below the threshold for clear audio reception. Now it's back to 52. Now it's gone again. Robert, we have a problem with the antenna. Wallace's gaze flickered to the third man, crammed into the back of the vehicle. Dr. Ben Carter, the nation's preeminent animal behaviorist, poached from the Navy's Marine Mammal Program for this singular, bizarre operation, was running a hand through his thinning hair. He looked physically ill, his face pale under the green glow of the monitors. "It's the subcutaneous fat layer," Carter said, his voice strained. "We saw this in 2 of the failed candidates. The adipose tissue is denser than our lab models predicted. It's attenuating the signal every time she contracts her dorsal muscles. The antenna wire is essentially being momentarily shielded by her own body. Can you fix it?" Wallace's question was not a request. It was a command. Reed's fingers flew across her keyboard, bringing up a diagnostic overlay. "There's a remote firmware patch I can push. It's experimental. It will bypass the standard power regulators for the transmitter and boost the amplifier's gain by 30%. It will give us a clear, steady signal, but it will create a cascade failure in the power cell. We'll be burning through the lithium iodide battery at twice the projected rate. Our operational window will shrink from 64 minutes to less than 30. And there's a non-trivial chance it could overheat the implant, causing a pain response that will override all of Ben's conditioning. Push the patch," Wallace said without hesitation. A 30-minute window is better than no window at all. As Reed worked, Carter pointed to the main monitor. The tech is irrelevant if she won't move. The hunger motivation, which we've reinforced for 600 hours, is a primary driver. But it isn't absolute. The environment is too stimulus-rich. There's a pierogi vendor a block away. The smell of fried dough and onions is carrying on the wind. There are at least 3 large crows in that linden tree, a direct competitor for food scraps. There are at least 4 other stray animals in a 200-yard radius, potential territorial threats. We're asking her to ignore 1,000,000 years of instinct in favor of a sound she's been trained to associate with a food reward she can't see or smell. Wallace ignored him. He had registered Carter's objections in 17 separate memoranda. They were part of the operational record. His job now was execution, not debate. "Patch deployed," Reed announced. The signal strength indicator on her monitor jumped to a solid negative 40 decibels per milliwatt and held steady. "She can hear us, Robert. She just isn't listening." Wallace keyed the mic again, his knuckles white against the cheap plastic housing. "Asset Kitty. Execute Directive Alpha. Proceed to the bench. I repeat, proceed to the bench." On the monitor, the asset, a small gray female cat designated F-22 in the project logs, was no longer static. She was now intensely focused on something off-camera to the right. Her ears swiveled, her body tensed. She took a deliberate step, not towards the park bench where the secrets of the Soviet Union's new Project 705 Lyra class silent submarine propulsion system were being discussed, but towards a discarded piece of newspaper fluttering in the breeze. Reed's fingers flew across her control panel, a blur of motion. "I'm sending the primary ultrasonic directional cue. A 40 kilohertz pulse, 0.2-second duration, targeting the right auditory nerve implant. It's aversive but non-painful. It should trigger the conditioned response to turn her head left, back toward the target vector." The cat on the screen flinched, its right ear twitching violently. For a fraction of a second, its head snapped back toward the bench, its eyes locking onto Volkov. Carter let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, a faint hiss in the silent vehicle. Then, with a dismissive flick of its head, the cat turned back toward the newspaper. A ZIL limousine was slowing down further down the street, its brakes squealing a high-pitched protest that was well within the range of human hearing, and therefore a competing, more immediate sensory input. "She's not responding to the cue," Reed said, her voice tight, the first crack in her professional armor. "The street noise, the brake squeal, must be creating acoustic interference with the implant's receiver." Carter shook his head, a grim, knowing gesture. "It's not interference, Evelyn. It's choice. She's processed our signal and the real-world stimuli, and she's decided the fluttering paper is more interesting, a bigger potential source of prey than the sound in her ear. This is exactly what I warned about in the final risk assessment." Wallace watched the monitor, his jaw set like granite. The entire operation, codenamed Acoustic Kitty, was predicated on a simple, audacious premise. No one suspects a cat. You can sweep for bugs with a technical surveillance countermeasures team. You can pat down human assets for wires. You can jam long-range listening devices with broad-spectrum RF interference. But a stray cat wandering through a park? It was the perfect invisible listening post, a biological Trojan horse. Now, that perfect asset was about to walk into traffic. "Override," Wallace commanded, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Full impulse. Give her the maximum aversive tone. Directive Zeta." Reed hesitated, her fingers hovering over a shielded red key on her console. "Sir?" The The test subjects in the control group showed extreme distress at that level. It's a 60 kHz full amplitude signal. It induces a significant pain response. It could compromise all future conditioning, cause her to panic. "Do it," Wallace snapped, his eyes locked on the screen. "There is no future conditioning if she's dead." Reed flipped the shield and pressed the key. On the screen, the cat suddenly arched its back, its fur standing on end. A pained, silent hiss, visible only in the tension of its whiskers and the curl of its lip. It took a frantic, panicked step away from the street, back towards the relative safety of the park. But it was disoriented, confused. The Zeta Directive was designed as a last resort punishment, not a navigational cue. It ran, not towards the bench, not back towards its release point, but parallel to the street, a gray blur of terror. The ZIL limousine, having dropped off its passenger, accelerated. The driver was a party apparatchik, preoccupied with his own importance, not with the small gray shape darting out from behind a parked car. The monitor showed a brief, chaotic tumble of fur and chrome, a flicker of movement. Then, stillness. The biomonitor beside Reed flatlined, its rhythmic green pulse replaced by a single, unwavering horizontal line. It emitted a single, piercing tone that filled the silent vehicle, a mechanical scream that signified the death of an animal and the collapse of a multi-million-dollar intelligence operation. $22 million, 18 months. The nation's top scientific and intelligence minds, from Langley to the Pentagon. All of it erased in an instant by a ZIL limousine and the immutable, unpredictable nature of a cat. Wallace closed his eyes. For a single second, he allowed the crushing weight of the failure to wash over him. Then he sealed it away. He didn't say a word to Reed or Carter. He just keyed the mic to the driver's compartment. "We're burned. Get us out of here. Standard exfiltration route. Now." The Volga lurched into motion, blending seamlessly into the Moscow traffic. It left behind the catastrophic failure of one of the most bizarre and expensive operations in the history of the Cold War. The question that would haunt the after-action reports and the hushed conversations in the Langley cafeteria for years wasn't how it ended, but how, in God's name, it ever began. Phase 1. The Conception. Langley, Virginia, CIA headquarters, 18 months earlier. The briefing room, designated SCIF-7 for Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, was sterile, windowless, and chilled to a constant 18 degrees Celsius, a temperature that discouraged long meetings and fostered a sense of urgency. The air tasted of recycled oxygen and paranoia. Deputy Director of Operations Thomas Karamessines, a man whose smile never reached his cold, calculating eyes, stood before a vast, wall-sized map of the North Atlantic. A web of red lines crisscrossed the map, denoting the known patrol routes of Soviet nuclear submarines. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice a low, gravelly hum that commanded absolute attention. "For the last decade, we have owned the deep ocean. The sound surveillance system, our little garden of microphones on the seabed, has been our ace in the hole. From the GIUK Gap to the coast of Florida, we hear every propeller, every hull creak from Murmansk to Cuba. We know where their boomers are before their own captains do. That advantage," he paused, tapping a specific point on the map near the Greenland-Iceland-UK Gap with a long wooden pointer, "is about to end." He clicked a remote. A grainy satellite photo, stamped Top Secret/Umbra, appeared on the screen. It showed a sprawling naval shipyard. "This is Severodvinsk Naval Base, 45 degrees east longitude. 6 months ago, our sources reported a new class of submarine under construction, Project 705, codenamed Lyra, by NATO. We believed it was a standard hunter-killer, an incremental improvement on their Victor class. We were wrong. He clicked again. A single paragraph of text, translated from a Russian technical document acquired at great cost by a human asset, appeared on the screen. It spoke of a lead-bismuth eutectic liquid metal-cooled reactor and a magnetohydrodynamic drive with a non-cavitating pump jet. Karamessines let the technical jargon hang in the air, its significance slowly dawning on the men in the room. What this means, for those of you without an engineering degree, he continued, is a submarine that runs without the noisy pumps required for a pressurized water reactor. It means a propulsion system that doesn't create cavitation, the telltale sound of collapsing water bubbles that is the primary signature our SOSUS network is designed to detect. It means a submarine that is potentially 100 times quieter than their current fleet. Quiet enough to be completely invisible to our entire undersea surveillance network. Quiet enough to park 20 miles off the coast of Norfolk, Virginia, launch its entire nuclear payload, and be halfway back to Russia before we even know we're at war. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy. This wasn't just a threat. It was an existential crisis. The entire doctrine of mutually assured destruction was predicated on second strike capability, which itself was predicated on knowing where the other side's weapons were. This new submarine erased that knowledge, turning the Cold War into a guessing game where the first move could be the last. The lead scientist on this project, Karamessines continued, clicking to a new slide showing a stern, black-and-white photograph of a man in his late 50s, is Dr. Anatoly Volkov, a genius, a patriot, and a paranoid recluse. He works at the protected Kurganov Research Institute outside Moscow. He lives in a dacha in a gated community for the party elite, and he is personally shadowed by a KGB counterintelligence detail from the Second Chief Directorate, led by none other than Colonel Ivan Morozov. A murmur went through the room. Morozov was a legend, a ghost story the CIA told its new recruits. He was the man who had rolled up their entire Moscow station in '62, exposing a network that had taken a decade to build, not with brute force, but with meticulous, painstaking analysis of their tradecraft. He didn't just catch spies, he dismantled them, piece by piece with surgical precision. Karamessines nodded. Exactly. We cannot get a human asset near Volkov. His dacha is swept for listening devices twice a day by a dedicated team. His phone is tapped by his own people. His driver is KGB. His cook is KGB. His gardener is probably KGB. Morozov has built a fortress of paranoia around this man. But every fortress has a crack. Another click. A new slide showed a simple, hand-drawn map of a small park. Volkov has a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, weather permitting, he is driven to a small, secluded park just outside the diplomatic quarter. He walks for exactly 1 hour with his primary aide. No security detail is allowed within 50 yards. They believe the open space and the lack of fixed infrastructure makes electronic surveillance impossible. He uses this time for his most sensitive project discussions. For 1 hour, twice a week, the secrets of his silent submarine are spoken aloud in that park. We need to be there. We need a microphone next to him on that bench. This was where Robert Wallace, then chief of the Soviet operations desk, spoke for the first time. Wallace was a product of the old OSS, a man who believed in tradecraft, dead drops, and the subtle art of human manipulation. He saw the world in shades of gray. We've run the scenarios, Tom. A long-range parabolic microphone would be spotted instantly by Morozov's rooftop surveillance teams. A device planted on the bench would be found by the KGB's pre-sweep team. Their equipment is first-rate. An agent posing as a jogger or a maintenance worker would be identified, photographed, and tracked within minutes. Morozov's people are not amateurs. Karamessines turned to him, his gaze sharp. I know. That's why your conventional methods are off the table. We need something new. Something Morozov would never, in a million years, anticipate. He looked to the end of the table, at a woman who had remained silent throughout the briefing. Dr. Evelyn Reed of the Directorate of Science and Technology. Dr. Reed, Karamessines said, you believe you have a solution. Reed pushed her glasses up her nose. We have a theoretical one. It's unorthodox. She opened a file, her movements precise and economical. The problem, as stated, is placing a microphone and transmitter inside a security perimeter that is actively hostile to all forms of electronics and unfamiliar human presences. The solution is to disguise the surveillance package inside a platform that is native to the environment, considered non-threatening, and has a biological reason to be there. Wallace leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. What kind of platform? Reed took a deep breath. A living one. Specifically, a common domestic cat. Felis catus. The room was silent for a full 5 seconds, before a nervous cough broke the tension. Wallace stared at her, certain he had misheard. A cat? Think about it, mister. Wallace, Reed said, her voice gaining confidence as she moved into her area of expertise. Stray animals are ubiquitous in urban Russian environments. They wander everywhere. No one pays them any mind. A cat can approach the target, sit near the bench, and its presence would be completely unremarkable. It is the perfect gray man, the ultimate stealth delivery system. Wallace shook his head in disbelief. You want to wire a cat for sound. How would you control it? How would you get it to go where you want? You can't give a cat orders. That, Reed said, a flicker of scientific excitement in her eyes, is the $20 million question. It will require a surgical procedure to implant the microphone, transmitter, and a power source. But the real challenge is control. My team proposes a system of ultrasonic cues transmitted from a nearby observation post to guide the animal's movements. We can condition it using a combination of positive reinforcement, food, and negative reinforcement, aversive, high-frequency tones, to respond to specific frequencies. A pulse on the right side tells it to move left. A different tone means stop. Another means proceed forward. We can effectively create a remote-controlled biological asset. Karamessines stepped forward.